I froze, sitting up in bed staring at the wall as the markings pulsed faintly in the dim light. They weren't just etchings anymore. They were alive, shimmering with a pale, sickly glow that seemed to ripple like breath. My skin crawled. The fine hairs on my arms, standing stiff as static, tingled along my spine. I stood slowly, my legs weak beneath me, drawn forward by some silent pull. The cross lay on the floor again, but this time it was turned upright, leaning against the wall, as if it had been placed there, as if something was waiting. The air felt thicker, almost syrupy, as though I was moving through something that resisted every step. The faint heartbeat in the floor had grown louder, not in volume, but in presence. A deep, thrumming vibration that seemed to resonate in the marrow of my bones. I could feel it in my teeth, in the pulse behind my eyes. I knelt to pick up the cross, but before my fingers could touch it, the markings on the wall flared. For an instant, the glow pulsed bright enough to cast shadows across the room, distorting everything into warped, elongated shapes. The pulse of light wasn't random. It beat in sync with the thrumming in the floor, with the racing of my heart, with a rhythm that felt too deliberate to be a coincidence. A whisper threaded through the air. Not a voice, not a sound, but an impression of a word that seemed to shape itself just behind the threshold of hearing. Remember. I recoiled, stumbling backward, knocking over the nightstand in my haste. The lamp shattered, plunging the room into a deeper, richer darkness that seemed to swallow the faint glow of the markings. But they remained, steady now, almost smug, like something had finally been acknowledged. I scrambled to the wall, flipping the light switch, but it did nothing. The power was gone. The apartment was silent, save for the insistent, pulsing beat that had now fully embedded itself into the fabric of the room. My chest tightened, my breath shallow, my pulse racing to match the rhythm. And then the shadows shifted. They stretched outward from the corners of the room, not random, not abstract, but purposeful. They coiled and writhed, slipping along the walls, converging on the space where the cross had once hung. The markings flared again, brighter, deeper, until the entire wall seemed to ripple like the surface of disturbed water. I tried to move, but my feet wouldn't obey. It was as if the air itself had turned solid, pinning me in place while the scene unfolded. A shape pressed forward from the wall. At first it was just a distortion, a deeper shadow against shadow. But as it emerged, it resolved into something almost humanoid, tall, thin, proportions all wrong, as though someone had taken a person and stretched them out like taffy. The face was featureless save for two deep indentations where eyes should have been, black pits that shimmered faintly with the same sickly glow as the markings. Its hand, long, jointed, ending in sharp, tapering fingers, reached out, hovering just inches from the surface of the wall. "You were always part of this," it whispered directly into my mind. The pressure in the room increased. The heartbeat in the floor surged, matching the wild staccato of my own pulse. My vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping inward like ink bleeding through paper. The figure's hand touched the wall. The markings flared, the pulse resonating outward in concentric rings that rippled through the walls, through the air, through me. The floor trembled beneath my feet, a low, groaning vibration that made my teeth ache. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the thick, oppressive air. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows folding over themselves, twisting into spirals of impossible depth. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The markings dimmed, fading back into the plaster until the wall looked as though nothing had ever marred its surface. The shadows retreated, slinking back into the corners, leaving the room bathed in a silence that was somehow even heavier than before. I collapsed to the floor, gasping, drenched in cold sweat. The cross lay beside me, untouched, ordinary. But the warmth it had held before was gone, replaced by a cold so profound it felt like an absence of warmth, a hollow chill that seeped into my skin. I left it there. I couldn't touch it, not after what I'd seen. The next morning the cross was back on the wall, hung perfectly, no sign of damage, no markings, no pulse in the floor. But the air still feels thick, the shadows still seem to shift when I'm not looking. And when I close my eyes, I can feel it waiting, watching, breathing. The next night I left the apartment. I packed a small bag, just essentials, and left the laptop behind, thinking if I distanced myself from it, if I put real space between me and the screen, the hum would stop. It didn't. I rented a motel room halfway across town, a bland, forgettable place where the hum of old pipes and the buzz of fluorescent lights almost drowned out the low, persistent vibration that I'd begun to recognize as the background hum of the video's last 10 seconds. But when I lay down, when I turned off the lamps and tried to listen past the motel's own sounds, I heard it. Not through the walls, not from any device. It was inside me, a faint resonance that trembled through my bones, syncing with my pulse, steady and insistent. A hum that whispered just beneath the threshold of hearing, its cadence familiar, rhythmic, waiting. I sat up, heart pounding. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the digital clock. Shadows twitched at the edges of my vision, subtle at first, then sharper, darker shapes that shifted just beyond the reach of the meager light. And then the screen was there. Not the motel TV, not a laptop, but a screen glowing faintly in the corner of the room, as though a window into the same static-lined footage I'd seen before had opened in the shadows. The hallway was back, the flickering bulb, the narrow corridor, and the figure, moving forward closer. I tried to stand, but the hum pressed down, thickening the air around me until my limbs felt leaden, my breath shallow. I watched, helpless, as the figure crept forward, its motions jerky as though the frames themselves were tearing and stitching out of sync. The last 10 seconds stretched impossibly long, each heartbeat a lifetime. The glow of the screen grew brighter, spilling pale light into the room, bleaching the walls, washing over me. At the final second, the figure's face filled the screen, closer than ever, its features clear now. Skin like slick parchment stretched over angles that made no sense. Eyes deep wells of flickering shadow. Mouth barely a line, but twitching, moving as though forming words. I heard the whisper, not in my ears, but directly in my mind. Almost home. The light flared, the hum crescendoed into a piercing whine, and everything went black. I woke hours later, sprawled across the motel bed, drenched in sweat. The screen was gone. The room was silent save for the ticking of the clock. But when I checked my bag, my laptop was there. I hadn't packed it, I hadn't brought it, but there it was, as though it had been waiting for me all along. I opened it against every instinct. The screen flickered to life immediately, no password, no startup, just the video cued to the last 10 seconds. The figure inched forward, frame by frame, closer, closer. This time it wasn't just playing, it was live. I saw myself reflected faintly in the grainy footage, standing in the motel room, pale and trembling, watching the screen as the figure approached. I tried to shut the laptop, but it wouldn't close. The hinges refused. The hum vibrated through the room, shaking the walls, rattling the lamp, the clock, the bed. My reflection in the screen wavered, and then the figure was behind me, a shadow stretching from the frame, reaching out with long, spindled fingers that trembled with anticipation. The last second never ends. It loops, freezing just as the figure's hand is about to touch my shoulder. Just as the hum peaks into a scream I can't hear but feel in every nerve. I slammed the laptop shut, unplugged it, ripped out the battery. But the screen flickers in my dreams. The last 10 seconds never stop. The figure is always there, closer than the night before, closer than my next breath. And now, even with my eyes open, I see it. standing just behind me, waiting for the moment when the loop ends. When the last second finally plays out,